During my 30s, actually starting back in my 20s, I started having a whole host of a variety of autoimmune diseases. And as I got older, they got worse and worse. I ended up being diagnosed with brain tumors, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. I used to walk with a cane. They told me I had the beginning stages of RA. They told me I had the beginning stages of MS, and that by the time I got to my 40s, that I would be in a wheelchair. Now, I was walking with a cane, so it felt as if someone reached down, grabbed me by the hair of the head, pulled me bolt right up in bed, and it was like lightning ran through my body, and then I was in white space. It was the most restful, beautiful, unconditional, loving place. I was out of pain, and as I walked from the bed, I was headed down the hall and I caught my reflection out of the mirror. I just stopped and stared at myself because it was like I was looking at myself out of someone else's eyes. And so
she went to bed sick, exhausted, and almost ready to give up, and woke up healed, conscious, and seeing through someone else's eyes. It wasn't a dream. It was the moment a new soul walked into Sheila Seppi's body. Sheila had followed the expected path: marriage, children, career. But at 38, everything changed with a single flash of lightning that pulled her upright in bed and launched her into a realm of white space and unconditional love. And when she returned, she wasn't the same person who had gone to sleep. That moment marked the beginning of her work as a walk-in, a healer, and a channel for the Omnistream of Divine Consciousness, the multidimensional collective communicating through her. In this episode, you'll explore her overnight transformation and what it may activate within you. I'm your host, David Trotter. Welcome to the Awaken Magazine podcast. Sheila, it is great to see you. Thanks so much for joining me today.
thank you so much for the invitation. I'm excited.
Yeah, I want to hear about this season of life in your 30s, mid 30s. What was going on for you? What was life like? What was it all about? And then ultimately, what ended up happening when you were 38 years old?
Sure. So during my 30s, actually starting back in my 20s, I started having a whole host of a variety of autoimmune diseases. And as I got older, they got worse and worse. I ended up being diagnosed with the brain tumors, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. I used to walk with a cane. I had erythema nodosum, which really made it difficult. They told me I had the beginning stages of RA. They told me I had the beginning stages of MS, and that by the time I got to my 40s, that I would be in a wheelchair. Now, I was walking with a cane, so maybe I would have ended up, I don't know. But I was in a lot of pain, tons of discomfort. I had three small children, ages 3, 6, and 12. And literally, most of my days, I would go to work, come home, lay on the couch, and play with my kids from the couch. And so I was a very, very sick person. And I went to bed that way. What seemed to be 7 o'clock in the morning on September 23rd, 1999, it felt as if someone reached down, grabbed me by the hair of the head, pulled me bolt right up in bed, and it was like lightning ran through my body, and then I was in white space. I don't know how long I was in white space. Some people say it was an NDE. Maybe it was. I just experienced the white space. And in that experience, it was the most restful, beautiful, unconditional, loving place. I was out of pain. And if I had my choice, I don't know if I would have come back from that space. But what happened is my peripheral vision started coming in, and then my frontal vision, and I find myself just sitting there. And I'm looking around in the bed, and all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And I get up, I put my feet on the floor, and it's as if I had never experienced carpet before. And as I walked from the bed, I was headed down the hall and I caught my reflection out of the mirror. I just stopped and stared at myself because it was like I was looking at myself out of someone else's eyes. Now, I didn't realize at the time I had become a soul exchange walk-in. And there are many types of walk-ins, which I'm happy to share about in just a moment. But all of a sudden, as I'm looking at myself, I'm starting to get these flashes of past lives. Now, What's significant about that is I didn't believe in past lives. As a matter of fact, I had never even read a metaphysical book. I was in a very tight little box. I was religious. I was not spiritual. I was in a
You were a Christian?
I
You grew up
was.
as
I
yeah.
I was a
What
Christian.
flavor or variety had you been raised with?
I had been raised Methodist and then I chose Baptist, but at that time I was taking the kids to what was called a Christian church. Okay.
Mhm.
So they were more maybe Unitarian in their philosophy, but still very, very rooted in the Christian doctrine. And
Mhm.
so that's where I was at the time. So I had no foundational knowledge to even conceive of a walk-in. And if you'd have told me then, I would have laughed you out of the room and said that is impossible to happen. And so all of a sudden, these past life memories started flooding me. And as soon as those were gone, all this universal truth was floating through my head. And I had no idea what this information was. It's taken me 23 years to write it all down. And that's where I've developed the Living Light Archives, which I'll talk about too. But then I also became clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. They all turned on at one time. And then I started remembering healing modalities that
While you're in the
that
hallway. You're in
while
the
I'm
hallway.
standing in the hallway and all of this is happening. Well, my background was psychology. So immediately I'm thinking, oh my gosh, with the illness, my job, everything going, I must be having a psychotic break. That was the only thing I could hang my hat on. And so I started telling people what had happened to me. And they're kind of backing up
That
and
was
I'm
probably
going,
not a good
no,
idea.
look, this really happened. Well, when you come in as a walk-in, your vibrational frequency shifted. And so within 3 months, I left the marriage I was in. It was extremely dysfunctional anyway. So I left that marriage. And within another 3 months, I had accepted a job, moved to an adjoining state, and I had found my first spiritual teacher. Now, I was not looking for a spiritual teacher. What had happened is I was visiting the location where I would be moving. I was trying to check everything out. I was going to go visit the schools. I wanted to wanted to interview the principal, all that stuff. But while I'm there in the hotel room, of course, this dates me. I was looking through the phone directory and as I'm flipping through, I see it's like all of a sudden, it's like somebody shown a spotlight and there was an ad. It was just a business card size ad and it was for spiritual counseling. Well, years later, I find out I was the only one that even called about that. And I saw spiritual, well, I'm still thinking religious. So it's like, oh, okay, counseling, that was right down my alley. And so I called and made an appointment. And I told the lady, I said, look, I think I'm having a psychotic break. I don't know what else this is. And I tried to start explaining, giving a little background. So by the time I got there, I was pretty worked up because first off, I didn't want to share the story. I was almost embarrassed because it's like, I don't remember my kids being born. I don't remember my childhood. I don't remember anything except for what happened from September forward. I eat differently. I wear different clothes. My personality has changed. I remember stuff that is crazy to me. I don't understand anything that's happening in my life. Honestly, I thought she would write me a prescription for a little blue pill. I would take it, and my dysfunctional life would just come right back online and life would go on.
What
However,
was going on with your physical body at this time? Because
I
it's been
was
like
totally healed, 100% healed. And when I went back for my follow up visits, they basically patted me on the head and contributed it to their medication, and out the door they sent me. Well, that was a blessing in disguise. If it was me, I would have been wanting to run tests and everything, but nobody seemed to even notice. It was just kind
and
of
you
like,
went
okay,
off your medication.
everything, 100% off of my medications, everything. I had my health restored. And I had it restored immediately, but it just took me a little while to realize that because I was acting as if I were still ill for about the first couple days because I thought I was still sick and my body didn't feel that way. And I had all this new energy. So as I'm explaining all of this to the counselor, she says, okay, well, we're going to have another session and, da da da. And then she introduced the concept of walk ins and gave me a book. I was furious. I mean, absolutely furious. And I got up and I left. And by the time I got to the car, it really resonated and stuck with me.
Why were
Now,
you angry?
because it was so far out, I wanted help. And to me, it's like, this lady is crazier than I am. That can't happen. But then it started sinking in. And so the more I thought about it, it's like, that really makes sense. And she only talked to me about one soul leaves and another soul comes in. And that's what I was angry, because I was always taught, when your soul leaves, you die, you either go to heaven, you go to hell, and you're in eternity forever. That wasn't the case, because I remembered being on the other side. I remembered what it was like for the soul to slip out of the body. I remembered what it was like for the soul to come into the body. I remembered what it was like to be in my crystalline state, because I had actually come from a place where it was all crystalline, where it was liquid light, where it was geometric figures, etc. So
What do you mean
I
by that? I mean, you're saying it, but crystalline, what you came
We
from
were
where?
liquid light. The reality of it is, and this is a little far-fetched too, but prior to my embodiment, I had been with my collective and we were working on the crystalline grid of the earth. We had melded our consciousness with hundreds of thousands of other conscious collectives. So in order, I was not embodied, so we were pure consciousness and we just melded, okay? So I was in my oversoul state. We were actually working to repair the crystalline grid because there were so many fractures and there had been so much damage done to it by all the false matrixing and all the information that had been beamed in to the crystalline grid, because that holds the 5D information for this planet along with the instruction guide for Gaia. Okay. And inside there are, crystalline ley lines. And a lot of people have heard about that. So from the crystalline grid, it is beaming down information that connects to the crystalline ley lines, and humanity is subject to whatever's coming in and coming up. And there had to be some repair work done,
And
because that's
you
where.
I got it. I mean, Sheila, I gotta interrupt you because I just got questions. So,
Okay.
like, did you know that concept, the whole crystalline grid, crystalline ley lines? Did you instantly know that, or did you read it in a book after you had
Oh,
this
no.
experience?
I'll be honest with you. Until I wrote my first book, Walk In's Cosmology of the Soul, about 5 years ago, I'd never looked up anything, read anything. And still to this day, I have hundreds of books, but I don't read anybody's anything, because I don't want my information to get mixed in with something else. And then it's like, well, wait a minute, do I remember that? Where did this come from?
Sure.
Now, I will say, the counselor that I worked with also was a Hopi lineage, and she had been sent to Kentucky by Chief Dan Iwahima and had asked that she bring the teachings of the Hopi people to the White Eyes. Okay. And so she had these women's circles that she had invited me to sit in. So that was beautiful, because all of a sudden my kids had more aunties than they wanted. Okay. And so it was beautiful. But we began to learn different indigenous teachings. And that is how I really became rooted as a walk in. And what happened with me is, this was such a natural state when I began to learn about the directional energies. It's like, those are gatekeepers. Huh. Then I learned about the Hopi 20 count, and I learned about the weavers of time, and I learned about the architects. And I'm like, wait a minute, that correlates with some of the thoughts. Now, these teachings that I was taught was because I ended up being an apprentice to my teacher, the counselor at that time. And I studied with her until her death this past January. And so within those teachings, these were some of the original teachings that had been passed down, that was given to them and brought from the Pleiades.
And what
And
was her
so
name? Just
her
so I
name, Jeremy Lecron.
Okay, Jeremy
Mhm.
Lecron.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about this process of accepting that you are a walk-in? Like, at what was there a moment where you kind of were like, okay, I'm just gonna admit I'm a walk-in, like, and embrace it, or was it super gradual process?
Sometimes it's still hard for me to wrap my brain around the concept. I'll just be honest because it's like, wow, this is just phenomenal. But no, it was a gradual process for me because at least I had something that I could hang my hat on to the experience that I had. And because my teacher was working with me on this, it helped me to integrate more fully into the body.
Mhm.
So, what happened was all of a sudden, I understood that all those people walking around, I wasn't hallucinating. Those were my spirit guides. And the information that I was receiving and listening to from voices where there was no one around was my spirit guides. And then I learned shamanic journey. And when I had a name for what I was doing, traveling to the upper world, traveling, to the underworld or to the lower world, traveling in the middle world, I understood that was shaman, what the indigenous people call shamanic travel. And it was there that I could finally meet my guides face to face. And they, from 19, well, I guess it was 2000s, from the late 2000s on, began to teach me and to help me to remember. And one of the first questions I asked them was, am I a body snatcher? If I'm a walk in, what happened to the other soul? And they began to explain to me about birth plans and that there had been a birth plan in place. And even though it was what I would consider instantaneous and you would consider instantaneous, because there is no time actually, and they're in non-ordinary reality and we're in the ordinary reality, the bargain was struck. The soul of this body was Arcturian in nature and just it wanted out. And so when that happens, the body will either expire or sometimes a new soul will come in. And I ask, why did you choose this body? Because there's nothing special about me in any form or fashion. And it was like, because of your ancestral knowledge, or the ancestral information that had been passed down genetically, because of the lifestyle that you were leading, and because of the thought processes and behavioral patterns that you had, we knew that if we could change you, there was hope for humanity. And I'm like, what? You mean how bad could that be? And it's like, you don't understand. You had no framework. You were the biggest doubting Thomas in the world. And they chose me for one of the many reasons. That's why they chose me. And so I question them about everything. I ask 100,000 questions in a month, I can guarantee you. But I also began to learn that you know, there were other walk ins out there. And I thought all walk ins were like me. I thought everyone had the exact same experience that I did. And so about 5 years ago, they said, it's now time for you to write your book and basically come out of the closet. Now, people who knew me, people who were my students, because immediately I began teaching, all of these people were like, yeah, 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 you should write a book. You should write a book. And so I did. And my collective, I had no idea how to write. And I really struggled to get everything down on paper, but I did it. And then I thought, okay, now I'm going to interview other walk ins because I was looking for somebody exactly like me, somebody that had the same skill set, had the same memories, or, anything resembling what I did. And I interviewed all these people and I chose 15 because these individuals all had different stories. So for me, I'm a soul exchange, walk in, one soul out, another soul in. I found out that and my collective has told me this is permanent. And so I found people who also had soul exchanges, one soul out, another soul in, that soul out, another soul in. It was like a rotating door.
That
That
sounds very inconvenient.
I can't imagine. I
How do
mean,
you hold down a job like that?
I knew most people don't. I knew the tough time that I had and the integration that I went through, I mean, I couldn't imagine something like that. I think I have it easy peasy because I immediately had a teacher. My collective, I'm firmly, in with them. But then there's also what's called a soul overlay. So the original soul, the natal soul, will stay, but higher aspects from their oversoul will come in and overlay. Now, it will sometimes act like a battery charger and then it leaves. Or sometimes it comes and it stays and the original soul will leave, but it will always leave a portion of itself. Okay. And that's hard to believe too, but it's all frequency. So it makes sense in my mind. But then there's what's called the soul merger. And that's where the oversoul remains. You have a complete aspect of your oversoul that comes in and merges. Now, when I say complete aspect, if this is the oversoul, these are the different aspects. This is called the Shantias Khan, and this houses all the information that you're going to need for this lifetime. It has all of your choice points for this lifetime. It's kind of like your grocery store. Nothing in life happens that's not in your grocery store. You choose, you pick and choose what you're going to get out of this grocery store throughout life. But you're connected to that through your higher stream, your higher source stream. And then as that higher self comes down, it branches out. And what's out here within your auric field then is considered your spiritual bodies. And what attaches to the physical body then is what you call your soul. And so with me, that whole thing was changed out. All of my chakras, all the energy bodies, everything about me was changed out. Then you have different types of walk ins that are called poppers, and they only come in for a short period and they leave. I've never known of poppers to stay more than 2 months. Then you have what's called a soul braid. And a soul braid is when you have an aspect, a full aspect that comes in and your soul remains and they braid together. You also have what's called soul projections. And soul projections are when you have one of your galactic family members on another location beaming aspects of their soul in. Then you have what's called a soul layering. And that's where you have multiple aspects of your oversoul that come in. Well, as time went on, I was like, oh, well, maybe I'm this and maybe I'm this. And, maybe I'm this on top of being a soul exchange walk in. But these individuals that I met still, even if they were a soul exchange, didn't have the experience, didn't bring the information in, nor did they kind of think the same way. They weren't from the grid. They were from like a planet, or they came straight in from a source stream, or they were in a waiting area. So I was just like, oh man. So the book went out. I sold the book. I did have one person that responded from that book, and that was Ken Lloyd, that is like me. And the more we have spent time together, we find that we're both from the same Omnistream. So it's like he came in, we have one stream that came in, it's split. The divine masculine, divine feminine is held this way. It's not a twin flame, it's not a whatever they call, the soul, your soulmate or anything like that. It's the same stream. We think alike. I can pick up on stuff that he's doing. He picks up. I mean, it is really strange. So anyway, that occurred. And then as life went on, I began to meet more and more people. Now, the thing about my collective is they always pushed me, always pushed me. So it was like, go bigger, go bigger, go bigger. And I write about that in my first book. And so I thought the go bigger meant I had to do events, I had to do more healing, I had to do this and that. And I will say, the reason I was only doing spiritual teaching initially, and the only reason that I got into the healing was because they told me one day when I was working with them in our session classrooms, they said, people cannot drop into the essence of who they truly are as a soul when they're in pain because their energy fragments and their energy goes out. And they began to explain to me about the multidimensionality of our body and the vastness. And of course, me, I'm taking notes all along, thus, all the notebooks that I've had, for all these years. And so I started trying to go bigger, just like they were saying, go bigger, go bigger, go bigger. One of the things that happened in this go bigger is I started doing events and I started inviting speakers to come onto the land or to come to my office. And I thought, that's it, that's it. Then they said, go bigger. So I wrote the book. I thought, surely this is it. Go bigger, even after the book was written. So I had wanted to build a facility. I thought that was it. They kind of stopped me in my tracks after I got going with that. They're like, that's go bigger, go. And I'm like, just tell me what you're talking about. If you can talk to me, you can articulate, you can tell me all these universal truths, but they want me to figure things out on my own still. Okay. Because that's a little bit of the human experience. And so, anyway, what happened was one day they woke me up in the middle of the night and they said, we want you to create a starseed school. I'm like, what are you talking about, a starseed school? And I'm like, I'm already doing all this other stuff. But what they wanted was a platform for me to reach other star seeds to help them wake up. And then they began to talk about unity consciousness and the synergy that was created when people come together and sing the same song with many voices. There's different resonance that go out. So my resonance may not be what another person needs to activate them, because everything that I do, I'm about the soul first and foremost, because I remember it so well. And I remember all those aspects. And so for me, I want to wake people up. But some people are about the ascension, which I am also too, but that's their main thing. And so their message wakes up the people that's right on the cusp of wanting to hear about the ascension. And so what happened is I formed what's called the Conscious Awakening Network. And I started out offering people a spot, a channel on a network, and then we started doing events. Well, I did that for about 4 years, something like that, 3 or 4 years. And then they said, okay, now look, when we ask you to do that, you served as a communication node, if you will, to activate. You pulled in the information from the collective and brought it to life. And because I did that, it sent out this other vibratory frequency that other people had picked up. So when I started, there were very few people doing what I was doing. And now there's a plethora. So they said, okay, now just focus on the events. I'm like, great. Something you take it off my plate. I love it, but they did that to put more on my plate. And so they told me I was doing 2 podcasts a week, Mondays and Thursdays with Cosmic Conversations. And they said, now it's time for you to take a sabbatical. So I have Glenda Dawson, who's doing the Tuesday show for me. And then I have Phil Gruber, who's doing the Thursday show. Well, they now have me doing the Living Light Archives. And wait a minute. In between,
Can I ask you a question though? When you say they, I'm curious about that. And I want to read a couple of sentences from your bio, from your website to help us like expand this even more. And meanwhile, I'm feeling so less than. I'm like, geez, I just feel like a human, like a regular human. Like, geez. Uh,
oh,
I want to be a walk-in.
everybody wants to be a walk-in, and if you could request it, everybody would be a walk-in. But it's
Whoa.
it's not it's not as
It
glamorous
sounds
as it
painful. It
seems.
sounds painful. Okay, so this is what you write. You say over the years, more than 128 soul aspects within the Omnistream have revealed themselves to Sheila, each carrying a unique frequency and role, contributing to the work that she is here to embody on Earth. Sheila is not tapped into this collective as something outside of herself. She is the embodiment of the collective and serves as the spokesperson. Together, they exist as one. So, number one, can you, and I know Ken talked about this when he was on the podcast, but like, what is the omni-stream of consciousness, right? It's omni-stream of consciousness. Is that the right language?
It's the Omnistream of Divine Consciousness. And basically, this is mm, in the beginning, when the source desired to know itself and that first implosion of the I am frequencies began to come online, there had to be containers constructed for all of everything. That's where the liquid light, crystalline lattice, and the grid work came into being. That grid work itself is the plasmatic mind of the source where everything is contained. And that is called the omni-stream. The omni-stream is like a container that holds these different types of frequencies. And so we tap directly into that. And so initially, when I became a walk in, I thought I was Arcturian because I resonated Arcturian. I had a guide to tell me that I was Arcturian. He said, I am Arcturian and you are too. Never heard the word, had to write it down, had to look it up, and was amazed to find there was such a thing as an Arcturian. I mean, I'm telling you, it took me a long time to come online with some of this stuff. And so as I began then to work with my collective, this is what I call them now. It's actually my ODC collective, the Omnistream of Divine Consciousness. And so the ODC basically said, look, you know, yes, you are a soul exchange walk in, but it's not like a regular soul. And I'm like, okay, what do you mean? Now I'm comfortable. I'm a soul exchange. What is that? Yes, you're a soul exchange walk in, but the energy that resides within you is a tap stream, if you will, that goes up to this larger collective that is right here. And if you think of like taking hair, you know, this could be the omni stream that I'm connected to, and each of these hairs is an individual frequency. And those hairs could be anything from like the Mary Magdalene energy, which she comes through loud and clear many, many times in the sessions that I'm working with. There's what's called the code keepers of the 144 crystalline templates. There's like guardians of the cosmic web, Sananda. I work with a host of what we would call extraterrestrials. I call them our galactic family because they are, they have a soul just like we are. They've just embodied differently on a different planet. And so, when we leave this life, we can say, oh, we were an earthling. Now, maybe I want to be an Arcturian in my next life. Okay. So, anyway, in my next embodiment. And so I work with all types of individuals. And initially, when I started working, my collective identified themselves as three, the collective of three, but they never told me who they were. But I now know that's what is my SRT team. Now, the SRT team is angelic, Andromedan, and Arcturian. And how I know this is I have another Arcturian team that I work with healing. So the healing
What's SRT stand for?
soul reconnective technique, soul reconnection technique. And this was given to me by these individuals. And so first I was working with the Arcturians, and I have three Arcturians that I work with. And so they come in and I can see them working on people. Actually, when I'm working with people, like when I look at people and I go into that mindset, I actually see the grid system that makes up all their holographic bodies. When I first started seeing the grid system, I'll tell you, I went to the eye doctor every time you could turn around because it's like, I'm seeing these
No way,
things.
you did not. You literally went to the eye doctor because
Well, because yeah, this was early on when I started seeing the grid. I had no idea. I'm like, I see all these lines and everything. I thought I was having like a retina detachment or something. I didn't know. I did not know. And finally, when I told my teacher, I was kind of embarrassed. She's like, "No, honey, That's the grid system. You're seeing the holographic grid. But then later, I started seeing what's called the trauma body. And I see like little red clouds, if you will. Some of them look like little Brillo pads that literally attach to the grid. And the redder the grid, the more trauma that's involved there. And I can literally take one of these little balls, look into it, tell you the stories, tell you the past life, tell you the galactic life where it happened. I can tell you your trauma at a young age if that's what's in there, etc. And so I was doing that with clients when all of a sudden the Arcturian team came in, and then I would watch what they were doing and I would be able to emulate that. So, in a way, they were teaching me and I was watching and taking notes the entire time. And so one day they were working and they stood back. And when they stood back, there were these three individuals that came in and the angelic, the Andromedan, and the Arcturian. And they said, now we're going to teach you about the ley lines. And I'm like, oh, we call those meridians, you know. And they're like, no, we're going to teach you about the ley lines of the body. And I'm like, yeah, that's what we call meridians. It's like, no, Sheila, we're going to teach you about the ley lines of the body. And they did. And they began to teach me a whole healing modality that I now teach to other people. And so, anyway, that's also
Is that
part.
holographic alchemy? Is that what you call it?
Holographic alchemy is when I look at someone and I'm working on their grid system and I'm taking the trauma out. I do trauma release that way, emotional release, physical healing. I mean, and it's pretty instantaneous. And, you know, sometimes, yes, people with frozen shoulder, it's immediately released. People who, you know, I was working on a lady, honestly, she was in the hospital laying on the floor because she did not have any muscular strength in her legs. One session, she was up, she was sitting on the bed, she was walking around. Some people have phenomenal, what you would call miraculous results. It's not me, it's the Omnistream. And of course, because it's connected to the source energy. Source can do, God can do anything. Okay. And so that is the holographic alchemy that I do. The ley lines is when we go line by line throughout the entire body, all the way up. I've identified all of the emotional traumas that are caught in each of these lines. I teach people how to release that. I teach them all kinds of things. We ended up being connected all the way up to the chakras, etc. But from that, then after I was in that mode, you know, I learned that from these individuals, which now are my SRT team. And so then they said, okay, Sheila, now we want you to teach that. And that's when I'm like, no, 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 this is my healing modality. I created that. And they're like, no, this is ours. We created it. Now you have to take it out because it's time. People are ready for this type of frequency work. And so that's what they have done with me too, with the Living Light Archives. And the Living Light Archives will roll out next year. And the first part that will roll out is the initiate. And within the initiate phase, people will learn from my memories, from my collective, what I have accumulated and been taught by my Hopi teacher throughout these years of, you know, the creation. And it's very different than what a lot of people think of how the creation came into be. I teach them about the universal structures. I teach them about the soul, how the soul is constructed, the various layers of the soul, the different types of souls. I teach a lot of the basic, what I call basic universal teachings. Then that second modality is actually a healing modality where I begin to teach them what I started out calling them codes, but everybody uses the word codex, so that sounds cooler than codes, so I use codex now. But these are basically information tools that you can use, that you call out, that evokes change like that. Now, I learned how to do that and was inspired by one of my mentors, Dr. Viktor Frank, who taught me total body modification and how to work with vials. And vials, you lay on the chest, you tap them in to the electrical system of the body, and then it affects change immediately as well. And he also taught me about the gridded system differently, but the gridded system of the physical body. And he overlaid the grid to the body and taught how to go into those grids to open them up to read the information that's inside. And so once he passed, then I started studying with his son, Randall Frank. And so I learned these processes of how to put together all the information that I had been writing down for years in these notebooks. So if I call Physical Codex 101, that has to do with the adrenal system and bringing the adrenal system back online. But it's not just the adrenal system, it's the emotions that go into the release, it's the ancestral healing, it's the galactic trauma, it's this, it's that. Everything is broken down. So I'll teach people some of the basics of that. And then that third phase is what I would call this the living light codex practitioner, because that's all they learn is codex after codex after codex after codex. And then that fourth level will end up being a teacher training. So people who want to go back and teach this, because I'm one person and I can't do everything. I've got to have teachers to help get this information out.
My goodness. Okay. Whoa. Sheila, mind blown. Like your experience is just absolutely mind blowing and fascinating. I think about, I got a number of questions here for you. One that seems so simple when I was, playfully going, geez, I feel less than I'm just an average human. Um, do you find that there are people in the spiritual community that say they're a walk in because they want to be a walk in? They want to be a part of the team, right? Team Sheila Seppi and Ken Lloyd, but you're like, I don't really know if you're really a walk-in. Like, do you find that ever to be the case?
I do, and I can see there's for people who really are walk-ins, there's like a shimmer that I can pick up in their field because I can see that. And then one of the things I have found, it's not so much that it's like they're a wannabe. They have had a transformative experience and
Hmm.
they believe it to be a walk-in experience. Now, here's what I'll say to that. One of the things that I have found, just like I was talking about the overlay, you had to become a walk in to have the overlay experience. But now people's vibrational frequency are raising to the point, and they've done so much spiritual work, they don't have to be a walk in. They can actually connect in with their higher self, drop in, pull in more of their own oversoul without having to go through the agony of becoming a walk in, because that just doesn't happen to a healthy body.
Hmm.
There has to be some type of a trauma involved with that. And so it doesn't have to be like as radical as mine was, but there's typically some type of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual trauma that's going
Hmm.
on with people to become a walk in. So these individuals that think they're a walk in, they have all of the signs. They have a personality change. Maybe their diet changes. Maybe all of a sudden they leave relationships, they move, they this, they that. I've got a list on my website of, characteristics about to be a walk-in. They can say yes, 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 yes. And that did happen, but they don't have to become a walk-in. They do not have a soul exchange. They open up and bring in more and then close back up. So they're the original soul.
Fascinating. I'm also curious about you hearing other spiritual teachers describe creation, describe the soul, describe these experiences that may not be in alignment with what you know to be true. Right. I mean, when I hear you talk, it's so embodied. Like, I'm like, okay, either this woman has this incredible experience or she is absolutely nuts. Like, she is certifiably crazy. Like, you're so embodied, right? You're not thinking about anything. You're not going, okay, what should I say? Well, okay, well,
Yeah.
it's actually, I mean, it is just right, like through
Open
you.
my mouth and they come out. And it took a little bit of practice because to understand, when they first told me about the Omni stream, I mean, they had to really give it to me in driblets, okay?
Yeah, I would think so.
Because when they said it's not really like a soul that you think of as a soul coming in to have this experience, that I'm basically a conduit for them to flow through. I'm like, well, is there even a me there?
Yeah, right. What about
Is there
me?
even a me? And it's like, you are us and we are you. Therefore, there is a me and we are having a human experience.
My goodness. Okay, so back to my question, which is you hear other people talk about, like I don't know if you're familiar with Jerry Sargent, but he talks about a lot of these similar things. And I don't have enough education to compare between the two, but because you're so embodied, so educated, and when you hear someone else share about this and you're like, that's different than what I know to be true. How do you navigate that? Do you just kind of go, well, it's a different perspective, or I know I'm right, or do you correct them, or what happens?
Well, I know that I'm right from my perspective, and I know they're right from their perspective, because you have to remember everything is frequency, everything is laid, it's octaves. Okay. And so it depends on the octave from which they view things, from which they get their information. And so you're definitely going to have a viewpoint that's different. So if you think of a medicine wheel, okay, and there's all these lessons, and you have the creator stone here in the middle. Well, if you're in the south and you can't really see north, but you can see east and west, your perspective of the north is going to be totally different than someone who's in the east and can see that, or someone from the west that can see that. And so that's the way I always look at it, because I have so many people, when I come and I'll just rattle it off, oh, this and this and this and this and this, and they're like, well, I just had a reading, so what they told me is all wrong. And I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm right and they're wrong, or they're right and I'm wrong. What I'm saying, it's the perspective from which we give you information. On top of that, you have to remember, most of us are billions of years old and have had billions of experiences. And so it is impossible in a 30-minute time frame to give you eternity in a box. Not going to happen. And it's not going to happen with anyone. So if you go back to that person, they could give you the exact same information, but chances are it's going to be different. My information will be different depending on where you are in your walk, the information that needs to come through for you to grow as a soul.
So, with the Living Light archives, what distinguishes it as being unique? I mean, there are so many spiritual teachers who are doing great work.
Yes.
What would you say, like, this is the thing that's kind of unique about this, though?
Well, for me, the uniqueness is, well, first off, it's basically channeled information, but a lot of modalities are channeled. But this is actually living. This information is alive. The modality itself is alive, and it affects change just like that. And it's not just me, it's replicable. And so that is what I really like about it. Now, I know Jerry's got something very similar, and I don't know anything about his work. I just know that he has this phenomenal healing modality that he does. I've never studied anything about him or anything. So, but doesn't mean his stuff is right and mine's wrong, or vice versa. It's just the perspective that we're bringing to it. And so I think that each person who is bringing through information brings this uniqueness to it, and they're channeling it from these higher sources that are here to affect change in humanity, to help elevate their learning and their spirituality, to get people ready for this massive shift that's happening on the planet.
Hmm. Hmm. Talk to me about your daily life, because all of the things that you're talking about, it just seems so overwhelming. Like, oh my God, how do you even process this? I mean, obviously, you've been doing this for 20 something years, so I get that. But are you a normal person? Like, do you go to the grocery store? I mean,
I
you're
think
teaching
I'm
all of these
normal.
things.
I think I'm normal.
I mean,
I'm
you've
probably,
got the omni stream of divine consciousness flowing through you. You are with them. how do you make decisions about like chicken or steak or vegetables? Like, how do they help you?
All every all these just they make all the decisions. Everything is made. It's okay. So like I just took my granddaughter down to the beach. So she's down there while I'm here. So she's down to the beach. I'm walking down to the beach, and I'm thinking, oh, thank you, crystalline structure beneath my feet. Thank you, Grandmother Ocean, for coming in and bringing this. It's actually not the ocean, it's the Gulf, the big difference. But anyway, the Gulf, thank you so much for coming in. I love the birds, thanks for picking up all these little crustaceans that would just go to waste. And I see that. But that's also part of the indigenous teachings that's become so much of my life. So I get up in the morning, the first thing is, thank you so much. Thank you. Where did I go last night? What did I do last night? Sometimes I know, sometimes I don't. Most of the time I don't know, but I know I've been out of my body. And so, I'm always grateful when I come in and I wake up my eyes and I get up, I make my cup of coffee, love coffee. So I'd have one cup a day, and I love it in the morning, and I eat my breakfast and I do my thing. But it's constantly like, okay, go to the computer and work. Honestly, all I do is work right now. But they have promised. One time I said, I'm going to take some time off. I'm really going to take maybe like a month off and do nothing. And they said, what? You think you're there on vacation? No, you're going to work. That's what we're here to do. We're here to work. We're here to work. And so they have promised that when I get this up, my go bigger is only going to be adding additional courses. I don't have to worry about going through this plethora of information or all these kind of things. And I'm like, are you sure? Are you positive? Because once I had the Conscious Awakening Network going and had the book published, I thought that's all I was going to do. And then they asked me to write Cosmic Convergence, walk-ins, the journeys of walk-in star seeds and hybrids. And I did. And then I invited Barbara Lamb to co-author that with me by submitting case studies.
And for people who aren't familiar with Barbara Lamb, maybe just give us a quick background on her and why that was such a meaningful collaboration.
Oh, it's so meaningful to me because Barbara is one of the foremost hypnotherapists when it comes to extraterrestrial contact. She is world renowned for crop circle studies. I mean, she is, if you don't know Barbara Lamb, just look her up. She's all over everything. And she is phenomenal. And she is one of the most genuine, loving, caring people that I've ever met. And she has been a supporter and an encourager of mine since I met her. And I met her in writing the first book. So 5 years we became fast friends, and it's just been an honor to work with her. And it was an honor for her to submit these case studies that substantiated the information that I was writing about walk-in star seeds and hybrids. And so from there, that book came out. I put some of the universal information in there, just enough to kind of wet people's whistles. I talk about dimensions and densities and, the holographic universe and timelines, just enough to kind of get people thinking. But the archives takes all that information to a totally different level. And I've had people, if they want to see if the archives is for them, I would recommend that they first take a course I have on called Vibrational Mastery, because in there they're going to get a taste of the style of which I bring information through and a taste of how I write things. But I do have to say, Cosmic Convergence really was channeled through one of my beings called Tiamu, who introduced herself. And when she came into me, she brought this plethora of healing light language, like it was off the charts. I talked probably for half a day before I stopped. I was getting concerned. I thought, oh my God. And I knew it was light language. And
Was that your first time experiencing that?
that way, yes. But I had spoken light language, but I didn't really do anything with it much, but I did speak light language, and I knew that I had that ability to speak it. But man, when she brought it through, and she's elder mother from Andromeda, and one of her focuses is the DNA, and also in with the holographic grid. And man, she just comes in just bam, bam, bam. And when I woke up because I was talking. I was already speaking light language before I even woke up. And I woke up and I'm like, what the heck? And it just kept coming and coming. And I got up, I went to the bathroom. It was still talking. And I said, I've got to eat breakfast. I've got to check out this hotel. And
Gotta get my coffee.
I ended up staying an extra day. I did. I ended up staying an extra day because I could not stop the light language. No way I could stop it. And so, I mean, it was beautiful when it came through, but it came in bringing a healing frequency that I now use in the holographic alchemy work that I do. That wasn't there before. Before, when I did it, it was it was etherically physical. I would go in, I would digest, I would pull it out. Now I can work on people, send the frequencies in, and I can just watch it dissipate.
That's the wrap up of the whole interview. It's pretty cool. It's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah, it's pretty cool. And she serves as a spokesperson sometimes for the collective, but specifically the collective of the Yoni. And the Yoni is the first collective that I became aware of, that I was part of. And that was the Arcturians and the Andromedans and the Mantis, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, with the Christ consciousness. Then they took it, they said, and there's more, but they're not part of the Yanni. They're part of the larger collective. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then they started naming things and naming things. And then they started, speaking and saying, and then you've got access to all this other information. And that's through the Omnistream of Divine Consciousness, which is the source field, which is the plasmatic mind.
My God, Sheila. Okay, I'm now overloaded. I'm now overloaded because I'm hearing about some of these things for the very first time. And you know what's amazing? I interview so many people, and some people, you just kind of go, "Oh, that's interesting." Like they're really embodying da 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 da, whatever. Man, I really resonate with you. I really resonate with your style of communication. I really resonate with your omni-stream personality. Yeah, I just like the way that you talk about these things. I can hear it and it feels like it just resonates with me. So thank you. Um, and simultaneously, I'm overwhelmed. So, uh, Living Light Archives, is this coming out on a certain day? Is it all at once? Is it different courses that will be added and layered? And how do people connect with you to take advantage of this?
Well, watch my website, SheilaSeppi.com. I already have a couple things up, the vibrational mastery. In December, I'm going to be teaching cosmic convergence. A lot of the information in that book, but really built out. And then at the end, I throw in a little codex work at the very end, kind of as a bonus for people. And then I have another course in January on the universal grid, or the universal field and the holographic grid, where I break down and teach a lot of the elemental stuff. Now, if people take these courses, any of them, when the archives does roll out, I can check the box and say, you don't need to take this, 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 and this. And I can structure it, financially for people. So the other thing about this is the first quarter is going to have the initiatory phase coming out. The second quarter will have the first practitioner set. The third quarter will have the advanced or the master's practitioner set. And the fourth quarter will have the teachers. And so it'll all officially be rolled out at the end of next year. And I was trying to get everything ready to have it all rolled out. But I'm one of those teachers. I go back and I read and I'm like, yeah, but I forgot to put this in. I have changed this information so many times. And that's the beautiful thing. Once it's out there, I can't go back and change it, but I can do addendums.
That's true. That's true.
Because I work myself in a circle. And thank God I have
Mm.
a wonderful student who actually I've hired as an assistant, and she'll go through my material, and she's helping me to categorize some things and to look through it. And from a student's perspective, it's like, now what do you mean here? so
Mhm.
she can bring things to light for me, and she helps me put together the PowerPoints, and I would be lost without her. She's great. Jane, thank you. So
Love
anyway,
it. Wonderful. All right. SheilaSeppi.com is where they'll be able to find all of these things. And of course, we'll link to both of the books and your social media. I'm curious because I do know that you channel Tiamu and uh, through light language. Is there a possibility of you wanting to share a message with us today?
absolutely. She loves to come through. And so we'll do what we're going to do is kind of like a little healing, which is actually going to begin to release some emotions around stepping into your full power.
Mm,
Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
receive that. Let's
Okay.
do it. So,
All
what, like,
right.
how
So
does this work for you? Do you drop in immediately? Does it take you some time? How does it work for you?
I am them and they are me. I just start. So,
Okay.
yeah. So let's just close your eyes. This is light language. Ina ele ko ba ini she kata ya koto imina ila kudu ba kun mi shakata rushi ne batakai kete ba ona a ershana I kudu ko pa waka a na u mananali na bar kudu ko mani krala kate dubu ko mani ka u kudu bitik ne ka shadu u to ko bitik ko mani kata I waka a na u tuma a e Lana rushua wawaye na kapaduma eroyena na upa ina kedere kudushina batka ila tere kudu kapaya na e wawaye na tuma ana a rahaya katuduru raka irshana kudu kapaya e manu tu kapatimilishi katadu pakina kate isha 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 itu de pakin mi kudu barki mi da era kudu barki mi da kada kudu duru ina patika ada tayi katu ko waka ish katu gupet kin mi da ane la kudu pakuni mi kate ila nari tu pakuni mana island tu ko paurushu wa na e ina utuk de patkin mi da ane kudu kapatele shata iki wa la na shata tu I kapatu manala na e I turu sugar bari mana katera katu kapatuk romania katari katadupaka ena wush na patakela katu irashati ir kudubakin mina enalani kiti dubakumana en yish kudubakama ira katera kapa wa sh a ilane ikudubakuno mina katakata gurukor palikarabe ilana dulu to the bakimina ala di gurbakumini shagara al kudukupetik mina katera katagubaka wa sh wash ish wash lanata. So yeah, just take a big breath in and out and let that anchor.
Thank you. As that was flowing through you, what is that experience like for you? And then what is happening to me and those who are viewing or listening?
So let me. Well, first, what happens with me is I'm just talking. I'm just talking. The information is coming in. Sometimes people will want to ask direct questions, and we'll just give them answers from the team who wants to answer, who wants to come through, kind of thing. Provide information. But what I see is the frequency that goes into the field, and the field will start to light up. Sometimes it looks like little sparks. Sometimes I can actually see the geometric figures that go in, because we also have what's called nodes. And this is where the grid lines will cross in certain areas. And these nodes will open and close, and they hold information. Sometimes they hold geometry, sometimes they're like little vortexes or stargates, and sometimes they hold the frequencies of the healing. Not everyone is always ready to receive what comes to them, but they're close enough that the nodes will open up and they hold it until their vibration reaches that state, and then it opens. But as of late, my team's a little impatient. So they go in, they raise the vibration, they throw all the codes in, and then it's kind of like just popcorn that just starts taking off. And sometimes it goes directly into the organs. Sometimes it will go into the throat. Sometimes it will activate people's light language. It just depends on what it is that we're doing and the intention that I set. So whether it's healing, emotional release, whatever it is, we just set that intention and they just take off and do the work. Now, being a holistic health practitioner for 20 years, I'm always like, okay, so now they're working on the myofascia. Okay, I see that. Now they're working on the crystalline myofascia. Okay. So I'm kind of trying to follow along and watch what it is that they're doing. And because of my past training, a lot of times my brain gets in the way. And so I'm like, well, why didn't you go in and do X, Y, and Z? Well, it wasn't necessary in this case. Or they'll come in and do something. It's like, well, why did you do it that way? And the other day you didn't do that with someone. Well, this is what they needed. So, I just let them go to work and kind of watch what's happening. And a lot of times people want to know, and I'll say, hey, we just worked on, I went inside the kidney and we did this, that, and the other. And that's the other thing when I first embodied and I would shake somebody's hand, I would immediately know all their health issues, or I would immediately know what's going on in their personal life. And I was just like, what do I do with this kind of information? But a lot of it's been useful now that I'm doing this type of work and have brought it up to this level. So I can help people better understand. It's like they don't even have to tell me anything about them. And I can just go in. But I also used to, do mediumship work with people and the clairvoyance and clairaudience and that kind of thing. So now everything has come together. I can go in, I can read the field, I can tell them what's going on, I can tell them what their guides are talking about. Sometimes even loved ones will come in and there's a vibratory frequency that is stuck that needs to be untethered. They need to let them go. Okay. And so everybody is so different and so unique. And I'm always, always, always learning. And, sometimes when things come through, I'm like, just a minute. And I have to stop and I'll write it down. I'm like, I never heard about that before. Thank
Mm.
you for doing this session with me because I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Amazing, amazing. SheilaSeppi.com. We will link to that, of course, your social media and your books. Sheila, what a joy it's been to be with you today. And I just appreciate all that you're bringing to the world. Thank you for being a servant, right? You are serving humanity, and I really appreciate it. It's great to be with you.
Thank you for the invitation. I really had fun.